opening of Šárka from Smetana's cycle of symphonic poems Ma Vlast, My Country, conducted by Václav Talich in 1929. It was the one that opened the first concert of the Czechoslovak Festival, held in London from May the 26th to June the 4th, 1919, only 7 months after the foundation of Czechoslovakia as an independent state on October the 30th, 1918. The purpose of the festival was described by a spokesman of the Czechoslovak legation in London, Vladimir Nosek, who wrote, "The Czechoslovaks, who now have definitely regained their liberty as a result of the Allies' victory, are sending to London a picked ensemble of musicians, in order thus to express their gratitude to Great Britain and to strengthen the bonds of friendship which exist between the two countries, both in point of diplomacy and of art." A booklet published by the Czechoslovak legation in London lists the expedition as follows: Madame Emmy Destinova, the famous Czech soprano, previously better known to British audiences as Emmy Destin, Jaroslav Kocian, the violinist, Jan Heřman and Václav Štěpán, pianists, the Bohemian Quartet, the Prague National Theatre Orchestra, 90 members, conductor Mr. Kovařevic, the Prague Choral Society of Teachers, 50 members, conductor Mr. Spielka, and the Moravian Choral Society of Teachers, 50 members, conductor Mr. Vach. With the party came also 6 Prague ladies in national costume. They gave 6 public concerts, and most of the music in this programme will be taken from those concert programmes. But before the public parts of the festival, there was a private concert given to an invited audience in the Aeolian Hall on the afternoon of May the 25th. Among the audience were Alice Masaryk, daughter of the President of Czechoslovakia, and various famous names, including Lady Gladstone, Lady Cunard, Lady Stanford, Lady Randolph Churchill, Mare Hess, and Benny Moisevich. Rosa Newmarch, a vigorous promoter of Eastern European music in Britain, delivered an address about the significance of the festival. One of the performers at the first private concert was one of the best-known of Czech pianists, Jan Heřman. Later in the festival he played Dvořák's piano quintet with the Bohemian Quartet, but at this concert he played 2 solos, one of Smetana's Bohemian dances, and the best-known piano piece by Josef Suk, his love song. Suk was actually present at the concert as performer himself, because he was the second violinist in the Bohemian Quartet. We'll be hearing them a little later. Here now is Suk's love song, Opus 7, number 1, played by the pianist who played it at that concert, Jan Heřman. Jan Herzmann playing the love song from Josef Suk's piano pieces Opus 7. The private concert at which Herzmann played that piece was reported the following day in the Evening Standard under the headline, "A New Sensation." If the passers-by in Bond Street had a mild sensation at the sight of girls in wonderful peasant costumes disappearing into the Aeolian Hall yesterday, those inside experienced a much greater one. The cause was the marvellous singing of the two male-voice choirs of teachers, one from Prague and the other from Moravia. London can rarely have heard such astounding choral music. Both choirs also took part in the first public concert of the festival the following day, May the 26th, in Queen's Hall, and the reports of this concert were equally glowing. The Daily Express wrote of the Moravians' performances, "They were very characteristic efforts, intensely dramatic and charged with sudden contrasts of tone and nuance." The Daily Mail wrote that one would have to go to our northern counties to find anything to match it, while admitting that the technique of the Czechs is in many ways thoroughly surprising. This comparison between Czech and British choirs took various forms in the different papers, but the most illuminating article about the Moravian and Prague choirs came from Rosa Newmarch, herself an authority on Eastern European music. She makes the point that it would be futile to compare British and Czech choirs critically. The quality of the voices, the mentality of the singers, the whole outlook on music is in each case so entirely different. Our Welsh and Yorkshire choirs sing splendidly and heartily, but they sing chiefly for recreation. The Czechoslovak choral societies sing to keep their souls alive. This earnest, almost sacramental quality of their singing sets it apart from the work, however excellent it may be artistically, of any other choral bodies that are known to me personally. The Prague Choral Society of Teachers and the Moravian Choral Society of Teachers are unique associations, insofar that their members are entirely drawn from one class of the population, the most intelligent and, in the past, the most suspected and persecuted section of the Czech people, the teachers in what we should call the secondary schools of Bohemia. These are the men who, at any cost, have always been determined to keep alive the language and literature of their race. During the war they've suffered severely, as one can plainly see by their drawn faces and their air of weariness when they're not stimulated by the joy of singing. The Moravians in particular were marked men in the eyes of the Austrian government. It's good to see how rapidly they're recovering health and spirits in the sunshine of political freedom and with the help of our better food supplies. Several of the works which the choirs performed during the festival were recorded by them, though many years later. At the first public concert, the Moravian Teachers' Choir sang a chorus for male voices by Janacek, called Marička Magdonova. It tells the story of a Silesian girl who loses both her parents and has to look after her brothers and sisters. The father had got drunk, fallen into a ditch and cracked his skull. The mother was killed when a coal cart fell on top of her. The children are hungry and cold, so Marička goes into the woods belonging to the lord of the manor to gather some kindling. She's caught and taken to the town by the police. There she's ridiculed by the fine ladies of the town, so she wrenches herself free and leaps into the raging torrent of the river Ostravice. It's performed on this record by the Moravian Teachers' Choir, conducted by Jan Sopal.
Oh
Moravian Teachers' Choir, conducted by Jan Sopal, in Marička Magdonova by Janacek, a recording made after the Second World War. The Moravian and Prague Teachers' Choirs were the great surprise of the 1919 Czechoslovak festival, but there was also a great welcome back to one of the favourite dramatic sopranos of Covent Garden, known to British audiences before the war as Emmy Destin, but now using the Czech form of her name, Destinova. She had a wide operatic repertoire, extending from Donna Anna in Mozart's Don Giovanni, through Brunhilde and Isolde, to Aida and Madame Butterfly. She was particularly admired in London for these last two roles. She came every year to Covent Garden from 1904 to 1914. But during the war she was interned by the Austrian government in her home in Bohemia, and this was the first time she'd returned to London. Though she was only 41, she was nearing the end of her operatic career. She retired from the stage in 1921, though she went on singing concerts for a few years longer. She was greeted with rapture as an old friend when she appeared in the Queen's Hall on the 26th of May. Here's a typical review from the Globe. No one who was present could doubt that Madame Emmy Destinova made the hit of the evening. The glorious singer has hitherto been known to Londoners in operas of other than Czechoslovak origin. It was therefore a double treat to hear her in an air so lovely, so simple, so national, and so unsophisticated as the lullaby from Smetana's The Kiss. She sang it perfectly, with a tone of gorgeous quality, and with a mezzo voce which could not possibly have been surpassed. Emmy Destinova singing the lullaby from Act 1 of The Kiss by Smetana. That recording was made 2 years later than the Czechoslovak festival in 1921. As to whether Destinova was still quite the singer that she was before the war, some of the reviewers reserved judgment about that. The following day she was to sing Aida at Covent Garden, one of her most famous roles, and that would be the test. As the Daily News put it, she sang a lullaby from Smetana's Kiss and the Song of the Water Nymph from Dvorak's Rusalka, both characteristic and attractive, but neither calculated to give any scope to the talents of a great dramatic singer. Still, we were able to convince ourselves that time has affected Madame Destinova very little. There were numberless recalls, but no encore was given. But later in the programme, after the orchestra had played Smetana's Voltova, Destinova came back to sing 2 songs by the conductor of the orchestra, Karel Kovařevic. The second of these, Slovak Song, gave the audience a more complete impression of what she could still do. Here, Madame Destinova sang with matchless dramatic fervour and all her old mastery of every vocal resource. Quite naturally, she had to sing it again. Slovak Song by Karel Kovařevic, sung by Emmy Destinova in 1915. As well as 3 concerts in Queen's Hall, the 1919 festival included 2 chamber concerts at the Wigmore Hall. The principal attraction of these concerts was again a group of old friends to London audiences, the Bohemian Quartet. This was one of the most famous quartets playing around at the turn of the century. It had been founded in 1892 by 4 students at the Prague Conservatoire who were members of the chamber music class of János Víhan, the cellist for whom Dvorak wrote his concerto. They'd given premieres of 2 of Dvorak's quartets, and Janacek dedicated his first quartet to them. That was still to come in 1924. 2 of the original members of the quartet were still playing in it in 1919, the composer whose love song I played earlier. They played 2 piano quintets by Dvorak and Novak, and string quartets by Smetana, Förster, Dvorak and Suk. And 2 of these quartets they recorded a few years later, the first quartets by Smetana and Suk, so we can get quite a good idea of what they would have sounded like at those concerts in the Wigmore Hall. The Telegraph wrote, "The welcome that they received was the warmest of the warm, a welcome such as is only reserved for the very best of old friends. The fire, the passion, and the fervour of their playing remain absolutely unimpaired, while the requisite balance, the perfect unity of tone and feeling are as wonderful as they ever were. The Times made a more intriguing point. The Smetana in particular is the favourite warhorse of the quartet, and their performance of it is one of the curiosities of musical execution. Apparently, everyone does just what he likes and how he likes, yet there's never any question of the slightest misunderstanding. Their recording of Smetana's first quartet is absolutely fascinating. It's an example of the most old-fashioned string quartet playing to have been preserved on records. There's lots of swooping portamento, as was usual with players of their generation, but there's also remarkably little vibrato, and a style of phrasing which is much less projected than modern phrasing. It takes a little time to get used to it, but there's a lot of subtlety in it, and it's fair to think of this as an example of the best of late 19th century quartet playing. Here's the slow movement of Smetana's Quartet No. 1 in E minor, with the title From My Life. It was recorded by the Bohemian Quartet in 1928. the Bohemian Quartet playing Smetana's Quartet No. 1, recorded in 1928. The orchestra, which came for the Czechoslovak Festival in London in 1919, was the orchestra of the Prague National Theatre, conducted by Karel Kavarževits. About their playing, the Times wrote, "We have players as good individually, though hardly in the mass. The rhythm of these men is a thing we only dream of. Every player has it in him to start with, and the conductor is only there to say when, to give them permission to do their best, not to galvanize them into life." That was after a concert in which they'd played Dvorak's New World Symphony, a work perfectly well known to British orchestras. In the previous concert they'd played Smetana's Vltava and Šárka, and 3 of Dvorak's Slavonic dances. The symphony and the pieces by Smetana were recorded by the Prague National Theatre Orchestra, but not until the late 40s, and the copies in the BBC Gramophone Library are not in good enough condition to play. So I think the nearest I can get to what the orchestra would have sounded like in 1919 is to play an extract from the Prague National Theatre's 1933 recording of The Bartered Bride. You can certainly hear what the Times meant about rhythm in their performance of the polka which ends Act 1. The Polka from the Bartered Bride by Smetana, performed by the orchestra and chorus of the Prague National Theatre, conducted by Ottokar Ostrachil, the successor to Kovařevic as conductor of the theatre. That was from a complete recording of the opera made in 1933. As well as familiar orchestral music, the Czech visitors brought with them a number of works which were unknown in Britain. The last of the orchestral concerts on June the 2nd included the Fantasy for Violin and Orchestra by Josef Suk and the Slovak Suite by Vítislav Novák. The critic of the Manchester nationalism. The novelties were not quite as stimulating as one was led to expect. It would be easy to find comfort and analogy in the political history of Bohemia, arguing that as long as it was tied to Austria, the real genius of the country had had little chance of free development. As a matter of fact, history shows rather the contrary, and nations bound by a tyrannical regime have been able to express themselves in art and in lasting form. Political liberty was unknown in Italy when her craftsmen gave to the world some of their most beautiful creations. The great modern Russian music came to life under the regime of the Tsars. Bohemia herself produced Dvorak and Smetana in the last generation, and if the composers we heard last night did not make a very deep impression, the obvious cause is that they are not of the same rank. Most of the other critics were more enthusiastic about the new music. In particular, the Slovak Suite by Novák was described as a work of charm and freshness, offering in its 5 sections contrasts that delighted the audience. Novák was born in 1870 and was a pupil of Dvorak at the Prague Conservatoire. He became an enthusiastic collector of folk song, particularly in Moravia and Slovakia, and a number of them appear in his Slovak Suite, which was written in 1903. Here's the third movement, which has the title The Two Lovers.